Hello, and welcome to this episode of Building Better Teams, the podcast dedicated to exploring the principles, strategies, and stories behind successful team dynamics. So, I'm your host, Robert, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today as we embark on a journey of discovery, growth, and transformation. At Building Better Teams, we understand the critical role that effective teamwork plays in achieving extraordinary results. And whether you're a team in the corporate world, a nonprofit organization, or any other field, this podcast is your go to resource for valuable insights and practical advice. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations with experts who have firsthand experience in building and leading high performing teams. So, let me introduce today's esteemed guest, Connor Dube. Connor, am I saying your name correctly? I should ask.
You got
Okay,
it perfect right out the gate. That was pretty
awesome, man. I
impressive.
like to do my little.
I was like, I realized he didn't ask me before, so this is gonna go one of two ways, which either way I'm fine with.
Well, awesome. So before we get into let's get right into your introduction. Connor, the content king Doobie, is a renowned authority in the realm of team development and collaboration. He is an advisor, host of the B2B Mentors Podcast, and multi-time entrepreneur behind brands like provencontent.com. From his first oddball business at 7, Connor has gone on to generate over 8 figures in sales, 8 figures in sales by his early 20s, and coached hundreds of high level marketers on content marketing and social selling strategies. He's been featured on leading marketing podcasts, platforms, stages, and contributed coursework to help colleges modernize their curriculum in B2B sales and marketing. And with a wealth of experience spanning many years, he's helped countless individuals and organizations unleash their true potential. We are privileged to have Connor here today to share their expertise, share his expertise, anecdotes, and strategies for building better teams.
Privilege is all mine, my friend. Thank you for having me. And shout out to our mutual connection, Mr. Greg, our actually client of ours, which is really fun, and I'm super excited and impressed that you folks are getting this podcast on its
Absolutely.
legs.
Shout out to Greg. Shout out to you as well for spending your time. You've got a lot of things going on. Sounds like you've got a very impressive background and you're very busy from what I understand. Like I said, we're grateful to have your time. We will definitely get into, so, just real quick, this podcast is all about building better teams, and the leaders that come onto this show, you have done that. You have done that to be selected to be on this show and to share insight. But before we get into like all the detail nitty gritty of like the team building, we just want to get to know you and your background a little bit better. So Connor, would you kind of take us through your career experiences? Maybe what's brought you here, maybe the last 5, 10 years that kind of brought you to this point.
Yeah, and not only have I done it, but because folks may look at me and be like, "Who is this young face of someone with all this leadership experience in such a short amount of time?" But I have really dedicated a lot of my time, especially since I myself have been a podcaster for the past several years now, and not only that, have invested heavily into mentors, business coaches that have led, billion-dollar brands, nine-figure brands, $100 million brands, led thousands of folks on their team, hundreds of folks on their team. And I've been able to shortcut a lot of my knowledge by getting access to them. And that's kind of also the premise of like B2B mentors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody creates success when you're a leader in a vacuum. You need that torch passed to you from those who have made the mistakes so that you don't have to make the same mistake. So, on that note, a little bit of background. Like I said, I've been just very passionate about entrepreneurship at an early young age. Naturally, I just always default as kind of a leader no matter the situation I'm in, whether it was back in my early job of doing dishes at a breakfast restaurant at the age of 13 to starting my own companies at the age of 22, managing and leading a department of over 25 marketers and salespeople internally, and some of them were 3 times my age. So early on, leading a lot of teams, and then more recently, I was going to launch another business, and I actually stepped in and partnered up with my dad, believe it or not, who had this legacy content agency that was called Proven Systems. Now I've rebranded us as Proven
Okay.
Content, and have led our team to great success. And also, not only just our internal team, but a lot of the time in those kinds of businesses, you're also leading your clients, you're leading vendors, you're leading a whole array of different folks to come together and make what you're doing work. Not just for you, like as a leader, it's not about you. Actually, people misunderstand that about leadership, but it really is about those people across from you, and sitting next to you, and in your office, or how most of us are now, virtually. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
You better stick to it, because it sounds like you're on the right path with this. You said a lot and you dropped a lot of gems already. I was expecting you to hold on to a couple of those gems, but you sauced them up
Never,
already.
never. I'm just gonna pepper them out there, man.
I definitely want to come back to some of the things you said. This whole "it's not about you" thing, that sounds like we're on the right path there. So let's definitely come back to that maybe a little bit later. Going back from the start, though, you mentioned like the importance of mentorship. That's something that, when you're early on in your team building leadership journey, that's probably even more important from the beginning. So like, what got you into the understanding of like the importance of like mentorship, and how were you able to take so many of those lessons and then begin to go from taking the mentorship to providing the mentorship to others?
If I follow like the string of events that kind of led me down that path, and understanding is, start I wasn't well connected, and I always knew from a very young age, like, we're not from a wealthy family or anything like that, very kind of lower middle class. And so I always knew, in order, just because I went out and seeked out the information, that I needed to get around people who were more successful than me. And I started to recognize a trend, right? So one way I did do that was actually through the medium of
Hmm.
podcasting, where I, instead of just going to someone I saw as a mentor, or someone who I saw as super successful, and saying, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants their brain picked. It sounds icky. Instead, I offered a platform. Hey, we have this podcast. Originally, it was called Mile High Mentors, because I was doing it out of
Hmm.
Denver. Would you want to be interviewed? And then I saw a theme happen,
Yep.
right? Which was every single person who is super successful as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a mentor, they themselves had mentors. And so, it's not that mentorship is anything special. It's really just an absolute necessity. Like, you cannot grow without other influences to help guide you in the right direction. And again, I'm a huge philosopher of, if you want a shortcut mistakes and your road to success, you need to find people who have been there, done there, and have accomplished it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I'm noting something. I'm taking notes here, and I think, folks who are listening, I mean, that's pretty much anybody who would be interested in team building and leadership and growth and all those things. It sounds like through your podcast, you offered value rather than merely asking for something. Even if it's just a small bit of value, that small bit that you offered, basically a platform for, leaders to come and speak and, drop some sauce, or share a few nuggets of wisdom, however you want to put it. That was enough to entice them to want to do that. And then in the process of, you creating this mutual value, it made it easier for them to want to share with you, and vice versa. And you guys were able to grow together, rather than you asking for something and, you taking and giving nothing. So I think that's a great nugget, a takeaway that, listeners could probably take. You mentioned earlier about being passionate about entrepreneurship at an early age. I find that very interesting. I mean, there are many 40 somethings who are still afraid to start the business or anything like that. You chose to do this very early on, and you came from, like you mentioned, maybe more humble beginnings. Like, what was it that helped you to take that step? Because I think that's a big part of, like, when you get into that team building and managing, 25 marketers, some folks 3 times your age, it probably required some skill sets that maybe you didn't have before. So, like what is it that got you in the entrepreneurship and starting your own company and helped you to kind of get on that path?
Um, I think, my parents are probably an influence on that. I realized when I did work for other people, like I'm the worst employee, because I just constantly assume leadership position, and that is challenging in some organizations. And by the way, like entrepreneurship is not like people nowadays see it as sexy and up and leave their very solid career to go into entrepreneurship, and sometimes it works out. The vast majority of times it does not work out, and so I wouldn't encourage people to go in. And here's the thing, people's ego drives them into that because they look at their leader, look at the boss, or look at the company owner and say, oh, I could do that. But I mean, when you really get into it, like entrepreneurship is really, really difficult. And there is ways to elevate and create success in your life. As I wouldn't say as an employee, but as an intrapreneur. And so that I think is extremely key to even how we function our business today, and how I coach and work with our existing team is you are the owner of a business, and this department in this arena is your business. And so you need to figure out what are the biggest challenges, the gaps, looking around the corner and empowering them to be entrepreneurial in, a position where most people, most leaders, company owners, they would treat them like you're an employee. This is a function. The nuance and what's worked for us is empowering them to see what they do, how they do it as a mini
Mhm.
business, if that makes
I
sense.
think it makes a lot of sense, and I think you're already segueing us right into that team building discussion, which I love because I feel like when you look at great leaders, they build teams in a very organic way. When you look at teams that are successful, people feel more empowered generally than teams that are not as successful, talking here on a macro scale where people feel powerless. I think when you look at the state of the workforce in America, and I think that's something that Search Solution Group, my company, has a great deal of insight in, being that we specialize in recruitment, the hiring trends, and we understand kind of, like where things are. Um, it's just really difficult. It's really challenging to see where most, let's just speak for Americans feel in terms of their situations at work and what causes people to want to leave companies and maybe try to go to be an entrepreneur. And there's no being an entrepreneur or having a business or working for a company is better or worse or good or bad. But this is something that we're seeing in the workforce is a lot of people want to leave their jobs, and at their companies that they work for, a lot of people don't feel as empowered as maybe they could or they should.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit on something great there because that is something, if teams act there's a lot of companies out there that like act like they do all the right things for their team, but they're doing it just to check a box. But the authenticity of it isn't there.
Mhm.
I want to reiterate that. Like the authenticity of how you're leading your team has to be there, not just, oh, these are the things that leaders say you're supposed to do, and so I'm doing it. But everything is so situational, and employees don't feel empowered and encouraged. That's why they are leaving in droves to try to start a business. I also think the internet age makes it sound and seem very sexy
Mhm.
and attractive. And if you can and do it, like, more power to you. We need more entrepreneurs, because you have entrepreneurs, you hire folks, you create culture, you do all those things the right way, then that's beautiful. But on the other side of it, what makes great companies run is not the business owner and the entrepreneur. It is the people. It's all about the people and them being the stars of the show and being super successful. Whereas a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I want to be the star of the show. It's the opposite. Dude, I work for my team. Like, I am an employee of my team. I work for them, they don't work for me. And that's kind of the positioning that has, again, empowered them to move things the right direction for our clients.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, that's what it's about, making your clients
I
successful.
do think, yes, that's a big part of it, as well as putting the client first, and not putting yourself first. Because you just said it. You just said it. You said, um, you're an employee for your team, and your client kind of comes first. And when you do that, you're kind of shifting that mentality. You're shifting the dynamic of, maybe the expectations of both your team members and also yourself. And then you're placing the client first. So you almost can't lose when you put them first. You also, I was going to mention, well, maybe I'll come back to that. I wanted to see if you maybe had some insight into a defining moment in your career where you witnessed the power of building strong teams in the workplace. Like, was there ever a moment that, in the last several years, or maybe in the beginning of your career, or maybe even recently, where you were like, wow, I can accomplish so much more by having this strong team than maybe before you realized that?
I was hoping you would ask me this question, and the reason being is absolutely not. There is no defining moment. There's no one, like, aha. It is a constant occurrence of moving miles an inch at a time. And leadership is not a like the power of a strong team. It should never be like, oh, there's one moment. It has to be a consistent leveling of, we're moving things in the right direction. Nothing is ever perfect. But what's really exciting to me is when the team starts to hum and buzz. And teams are always shifting and moving, and I'd like to say we've had employees, like, the business has been around for 22 years. We've had team members that have been around for 10, 15 plus years. And so I would say when things are really humming, that is that moment, right? So there's not one in particular, but when you get things, going at a level playing field where the clients are winning, we're getting stuff turned around, everyone's excited, and team members are coming to me to drive things forward, making recommendations, improvements, because they care so much about the results and what we're doing for our clients, and they care so much about our team that they are taking the initiative, even though their title may not be manager or director or leader. Every single person in our organization has that quality of constant improvement. And we have that culture too. Like,
Mhm.
no process is perfect. We will literally go to bat and disrupt an entire process if a team member, and within reason, recognizes, like, hey, there's a gap here. I'm going to raise the flag now.
Hmm. I think that you're definitely, you're on it, and I love to have this conversation with you. There's a few things I pulled out from what you just said, and also I pulled out, you said you were excited that I was going to ask you this question. I'm equally excited about your answer because I've had a feeling you might say something to that effect, and I want to hit you back with this response of a question. All right, so you mentioned the answer is basically no, there was no defining moment, and that you had to get comfortable with incremental success, right? So, from my experience, and from what I understand about team building and leadership, and making these teams make it happen, um, that means generally this is going to come with the challenges. It's not easy. You don't start off with a super well built, oiled machine of a team. And so I want to respond with, what challenges have you faced as you've built a team? Like, I'll give you an example from, you just shared with me. You said basically everybody that comes to your team, they have this sense of like ownership, right? Is that something that they come to the company already having? Is that something that you hire for? Or is that something that, you hire for other things and you know that you can instill those values through, onboarding and education and, team like building activities? Or so I'll that's an example, but really what challenges have you faced with building a team?
Yeah, I like our philosophy is, quick to fire, slow to hire. And so we are very, very, we hire the best of the best. I mean, if you saw the number of resumes we go through to bring a single person into our team is absolutely outrageous. And you have to do that when you're a smaller business like ours, especially. Makes a huge make or break difference. And so that is one of the biggest challenges is within this current organization. It's different when in the past I, worked for a much that had thousands of employees. The burn is much greater, but we have to have that retention and we have to have that stickiness with our team members. So we absolutely hire for it. But we hire for those top skill sets that we're looking for, but we also train for it. And I think that's different is a lot of leaders, they get a new staff member in and team member, and then they go through, okay, here's your week training, and then everything just stops, right? And then they just throw them to the fire. And I would say that has been a mistake that we've made in the past, which has since been really worked on and improved, is constant training, constant learning, constant reinforcing of our principles and our core philosophies. And I think I think a challenging part is that does take a lot more time, and it is a lot more hand holding. But if you invest that into your people, they're going to return that to you tenfold and save you way more time down the line of having to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing is like, um, getting up to speed, being able to like invest that time.
Hmm.
And then also when problems do occur, when you're in a very tight team, whether in a department, like it could have a huge impact on the business.
Yeah, and I would add another to what you were saying. You kind of alluded it, but getting comfortable as leadership, as the owner, with incremental success. You said it earlier, and also with just delayed gratification. I mean, it feels so good to like hire to bring a new employee in and to give them that training and give them a desk and give them a computer and you guys are good to go. But it feels better when they know what they're doing, when they've gone through a training process that is really an onboarding process that makes sure their questions are really answered and kind of keeps them, sharing their learnings and their questions, and there's a more of a feedback system, a two-way feedback system that you can make sure that they're getting what they need, you're getting what you need, and you're able to give feedback to them along the way. And that from a retention standpoint, you have more people that stay and feel like they know what they're doing. That feels better than to just hire somebody and give them a computer, right?
Yeah, well, and I would say like the most exciting thing for me is when someone on your team is just like totally elevated from where they were. Like we've had folks come into our company not from our
Hmm.
industry, never doing a position like what they've done before, but we hired them because of their personality fit.
Hmm.
It's a culture fit and a similar philosophy to how the rest of our team is structured. And they go from like knowing absolutely nothing to just crushing it in their position is absolutely exciting. And if I were to give some other advice as to what has helped make that happen,
Mhm.
because hiring is challenging. It is one of the most difficult parts of business, is, managing people.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of leaders expect, okay, I hired for these skill sets. This person on paper, has done this position before, but every company has its own nuances. And when mistakes happen, there's a drill down or punishment or negativity. We encourage failure. We're like, yes, make a mistake. Like, that's freaking awesome, dude. Like, I'm so pumped you made that mistake, but we never make the same mistake twice.
Mhm. And I think
When,
one of the things that I wanted to, because I love I love talking with you because you segue right into like where I'm going. We talked about hiring, the challenges of hiring, and
I read minds.
I love it.
That's what's
That's
working right.
osmosis. I love it because we talk about hiring. Hiring is very, very, very difficult, and if you don't do it, you're
Yeah.
not good at it. You're not going to be able to run an organization that's on that top tier level. So that's a great point. But managing is right there, like right behind hiring is one of the most challenging things. And so what you're talking about is like, what about when your new employee makes a mistake? That's one example, but like, what about when things don't go right? What about as you're climbing towards this greatness with your team, you have the ups and the downs. And one thing I wanted to ask you is like, what about emotional intelligence, the importance of emotional intelligence with team building? Do you have any strategies or have you seen any instances where developing emotional intelligence within teams helped you to navigate some of those peaks and valleys?
I would say we don't have to develop emotional intelligence with our team, because when we hire them, it's very clear that they are built in with some sort of emotional intelligence. And I would say, I interview every single person we ever bring into our company. I've done that in past positions as well. And I don't know if it's just my background, or um, I did door to door sales for 2.5 years. And so you've got to be very, very good at reading people. But I can read people very quick, like 5 seconds on a Zoom call or in front of someone. I can read them very quickly. Are they a right brainer? Are they a left brainer? What kind of personality style? How do they
Mhm.
respond? I don't think you can really teach emotional intelligence. Like, it's a natural built-in instinct, right? I don't know if it's necessarily a skill that can be taught. I mean, yeah, it can be taught, but to be enforced and to be practiced,
Mhm.
I think that person has to really have great self-awareness. That team member, that employee, whatever you want to refer to them as, needs to have great self-awareness. And that, I think, is depends on how you hire, because if you have to train for that, I think you're probably already in trouble.
I would
Does that make sense?
I would absolutely agree with you. I think it's, some people are going to be cut out for the role that you're looking for, and maybe some people, they're nice,
Yeah.
sweet, great people, and
And I don't know if I totally answered your question. If I didn't, just let me know. But
yeah, and I think you did. I think you alluded in a way to when I ask, the role of emotional intelligence. From what I gather from your response is that it's actually very important, but it's not something that can be taught. Is that how you?
it's everything. Like, I'll give a great example. We've had, I'll say recent past, a team member is like, hey, this other team member, they're probably not willing to admit it, but they're having some challenges here. And, they realize, that they were intuitive enough to kind of pick something up that some other manager or leader maybe didn't pick up
Hmm.
on, right? And then had the sincerity enough to come and like approach, so that we can proactively give extra support to that team member, in a way that was, nurturing, caring, and helpful. And so, yeah.
And I think and that's a great example. I think it's even more important to have this sort of emotional intelligence with your team building and with individuals on your team. When you look at like some of the challenges the world has thrown at us. In the last few years, of course, we've all went remote. We've got virtual work environments, and it can be even more of a challenge when you're just here on this computer screen, face to face, rather than face to face. So I'm curious. Again, we don't have to stick on emotional intelligence, but I'm curious how you approach team building initiatives with remote and virtual work settings.
Constant over communication, with the team. Obviously in a way that's not disrupting what anyone does, but especially being remote. I mean, we're set up on Slack. We, if there's any like serious topic, we don't call a meeting, but we just like Slack call, hop on camera,
Mm-hmm.
and we encourage like none of our employees hop on a Zoom call or any sort of call without being on camera, because we know and we teach on this, like you can't read people without seeing their face, their tone. And that's something that's absolutely missing out of being a remote company. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we are entirely
Mm-hmm.
remote, right? So and then every single day we have a meeting called the D29, and in the D29, it is solely dedicated for 29 minutes. The first half of the meeting, we just do fun stuff. Like we do trivia, we do, questions of the day, we just crack jokes, we
You
roast
do a
each
little team
other,
building, it
you
sounds
know,
like.
every day, every single day. And then we also use that time to come together as a collective, talk about wins, talk about challenges, talk about any
Mhm.
roadblocks. Instead of like calling a bunch of meetings throughout the day, we just have one collective to get our heads together. And I think the beauty of what's worked in that is we bring people together from totally different departments, which gives an outsider's view of what the other folks on the team are doing, what's working, what's not working. And we come up with ideas that wouldn't otherwise if you're just kind of working on something in a vacuum, or you're only working with folks in one department of yours versus cross department ideation, collaboration, and relationship building.
It sounds like you guys have given a lot of thought to how you structure hiring and also management and also like your day to day, just like, you know, how your team approaches a day to day for the individual experience to how that team is in that virtual setting kind of approaches their week and their month and their year. That's what it sounds like to me. And I think that because of the level of intentionality that you have, because having seen some of the benefits of some of the decisions that you guys have made and like you're kind of sticking to because they work, I think that probably doubles down in a way and helps you to continue to be successful. And then you are able to apply that model to new folks coming in, and because your company culture is sounds very strong, it makes it easy for new people to kind of gravitate towards that and stick to that. Am I kind of picking up what you're laying down?
I will tell you with absolute sincerity, our team, like folks on our team get more done in a day than most departments get done in a week. Like a single person on our team gets more done in a day than most employees get done in a week. And that's because we have that constant check-in, um, you know, uh,
Mhm.
accountability, structures in place. No one just kind of floating out in space like with nothing to do. And everyone is there willing and able to jump in at a moment's notice to support another team member, because we've encouraged that the success of you is not what you're going to accomplish, but it's what you're going to help the person next to you accomplish.
Absolutely. Connor, I'm enjoying our conversation greatly, but
Me
I
too.
do, of course, want to be respectful to your time, and I know you may have something else you need to run to. Before we, kind of conclude, I wanted to just ask you if there's anything else that maybe you wish that I'd asked you, or you thought that I was going to get to ask you, or something else that maybe you wanted to share with our audience who's listening, about team building, leadership, building better teams, and those sorts of things that we've been talking about. Is there anything else that maybe you'd want to share that I just didn't get to?
Um Well, first off, no, you've done a great job I think, and you conducted a great interview. I would say, like, understand understand there's so many nuances in moving parts to any business
Hmm.
and to any one person's life. And that fine balance of just being authentic and building relationships. Like, people look at leadership as this kind of static, because of these check boxes, I am therefore a leader. And it's always a moving target. And I think another great takeaway is just you can really move mountains with less team than you probably realize if you instill a lot of the philosophies we talked about, accomplish a lot more. And I would say reach out to me if you have any questions on, just what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, anything in more detail. And I don't know, anything else I might have missed, Robert?
Oh, no, I think that's a very swell. I think that's a fantastic ending point, especially with where, the economy is, where the market is, where things are going. I think a lot of companies will be trying to, see how they can be most efficient and make things happen, maybe with a smaller team than maybe they would have wished for or hoped for, a couple of years ago. So that's a really good takeaway. And I think, Connor, your encouragement of like you can do more with maybe with.
Let me add one more thing too. A lot of managers, leaders, they get very threatened by other, possible hires or employees that they have on their team that might outshine
Mhm.
them. But again, this is about building better teams, and building better teams is about leadership. And so the success of your career, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you are an intrapreneur or a manager or leader, the defining moment of your career is not what you're going to accomplish, but how you're going to elevate others to accomplish great
Yeah,
things.
like you
That
said
is the
earlier,
key.
it's not about you. Might be a great
Mhm.
takeaway for anybody who's out there watching and listening. So I mean, maybe in the future we'll maybe have more of a conversation with you, Connor. We've enjoyed the time greatly. I will say that that's going to conclude another a captivating episode of Building Better Teams, and I hope you guys out there found our conversation with Connor as enlightening and as inspiring as I did. So Connor, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to for joining us today and for sharing your time and your invaluable insights. I guess before we sign off, I'd like to give our listeners an opportunity to connect with you a little bit further. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing where our listeners could find you across the web and social media platforms, like where can people find you?
Yeah, and back at you. I really enjoyed the discussion and very much appreciate you having me on. And I would do one of two things. One, check out our podcast, which is called B2B Mentors, as in business to business or brains to brains or back to back, however you want to define it. But B2B Mentors, that too is on all your favorite podcast apps. And we bring in, we also do a lot of leadership. Bring in top CMOs, marketing leaders, business celebrities, authors, you name it, and that's really fun. And then I use LinkedIn. LinkedIn's my bread and butter. You can find me at Connor Dube, Connor Dube, Dube, if you want to connect on anything. And again, appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I think you guys should definitely go out there and connect with Connor and all of his ways you can get in touch with him. Make sure to check out the show notes for this episode. We're going to provide links to Connor's website, social media profiles, LinkedIn, and such. Guys, stay connected. Continue your journey of building better teams. And that's it from us today. But don't forget to tune in to the next time when we continue the conversation about building better teams. Until then, take care. Thank you once again, Connor. Everybody be blessed. Have a great day.
See you, folks.